Good morning, Anatomy 201. My name is Will Brockie. Today we're going to talk about skeletal muscle fibers and contractility, specifically the degree and strength of contractions that occur dependent upon stimulus. And really, it does all start with stimulus. The motor cortex located in the precentral sulcus of your brain. It works in conjunction with some voluntary movement areas that exist in the parietal lobes. Together, they get together. They receive sensory input from sensory organs located in your muscles, those spindle fibers. They kind of compute the task that's going on, and then they return the information necessary to perform that task out back to your body. Now, if you step back and think about your body as a machine, which is really what it is, you could think of three essential segments for what we're talking about. The brain would be your central processing area. That's fairly obvious. Your nervous system is the distribution network. It's how your brain talks to your muscles, which are really the engine of the machine. They are how the body moves itself through external space, as well as perform other vital processes, which we're not going to cover right now. And in a simple model of muscle fibers, there are three broadly accepted types of muscle fibers. Of course, there's many more, but we're keeping it simple. You have your slow twitch muscle fiber, and then you have your two different types of fast twitch muscle fibers. Now, one can think of the different muscle fibers as gears in a car. Your slow twitch muscle fibers would be your lower gears. They're providing a lot of torque. They have the ability to overcome inertia and resistance with a fair bit of ease. Whereas your fast twitch muscle fibers, they're kind of more your precision and dexterity. They're your higher gears. But what they do have in precision and dexterity, they lose in the ability to overcome inertia or resistance. The types of muscle fibers that will be activated, as well as the numbers therein, really are dependent upon the stimulus for the task being attempted. That's fairly obvious. Now, there are three types of muscular contractions that we're going to talk about real quick. The first one would be the twitch contraction, and then you have your summation contractions, and we're going to end with tetanic contractions, also known as tetany. Before we begin to discuss the different movements, it is important to remember that a single motor neuron is able to innervate multiple muscle fibers, thereby causing the fibers to contract at the same time. Now, once innervated, the protein filaments within each skeletal muscle fiber slide past each other to produce that contraction, which is explained by the sliding filament theory. Now, in a twitch contraction, a single action potential, whether from a motor neuron or from within the muscle itself, causes the muscle fiber to produce a single contraction and relaxation cycle we call a twitch. Examples of this type of movement that are commonly observed would be like facial tics, like the kind you get when you're listening to Professor Murdy talk, or the result of some other random muscle movements. These kind of things happen. The EEG waveform that would be associated with that type of movement would look like a simple little concentric blip, kind of like a P wave right before a QRS complex in an ECG. If during an initial twitch stimulation, a additional series of action potentials were to occur before full relaxation or repolarization of that fiber occurred, that would result in what's called a summation reaction. Now, summations are typical in really everyday life. They're what you see as concentric and eccentric muscle movements, like isometrics and isotonics. Those EEG waveforms would kind of build slowly and then kind of fall off. So it would come well above baseline in kind of a hoop fashion and then fall off at the cessation of the stimulus. But if the stimulus did not succeed and you had more frequent and building action potentials coming up on that fiber before repolarization could occur, and then coming to a plateaued level well above baseline, whatever it happened to be for that individual fiber, negative 55 millivolts, whatever, that's when you have something called tetanic contractions or tetany occur.
Tetany is typically associated with a few different conditions, one of them more commonly being known as hypocalcemia, as well as other electrolyte disorders dealing with things with like magnesium and stuff being out of whack. And of course, infections from bacteria causing things like needing to get a tetanus shot.
The waveform for this activity would look something like an uneven staircase until it came to a plateau well above that baseline, like I previously discussed. The greater the number of cycles, the more forceful and frequent the associate fiber contractions will become. And that is a fundamental building block for graded muscle response. So when you come back and you think about those waveforms, those are the visual representations for the action potentials and the types of contractions that are occurring. Your brain, working in conjunction with those spindle fibers, like I mentioned earlier, or other associated sensory organs, locate within the musculature itself, interpret the energy and force required to accomplish a given task, either by measuring the current length of a muscle fiber versus the force that it's meeting, or the velocity with which that fiber is attempting to shorten. The thousands of adjustments per second in response to stimulus are how we're able to successfully differentiate the force required for lifting a glass of water versus, let's say, a keg of beer, without using any more energy or musculature that would be absolutely required. You don't want to overdo the strength and dexterity for some things. You end up throwing the glass across the room, people are just going to assume you're crazy. Now, the relationship between stimulus and action potential firing rates is why we are able to talk, sit, run, stand, jump, and really do anything else that we think to do. At any given time, about 1/3 of the muscle fibers in an active muscle group are actually firing, and that's if you're standing to maintain posture, if you're trying to lift something, doing your curls in the morning. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it helps to alleviate from the possibility of rapid fatigue. If only 1/3 of your reserves are firing at any given time, that allows rest for the other fibers. The other thing, which is kind of cool, is if you were to simultaneously attempt to fire all the muscle fibers in a muscle at the same time, the strength generated, the force generated in most muscle groups would be significant enough to separate the muscle from the tendon attachment. So for all the bodybuilders out there, if they were actually able to successfully somehow fire everything at the same time, which would look awesome for that split second before your body shredded itself. Now, I know this was just a real quick rundown. I apologize for not being able to be there with you guys today, but hopefully we'll see you well next week. If I missed anything, feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to take constructive criticism. Be well, and we'll see you soon.